Alright guys, so today we get to check out a brand new pair of IEMs, and they're from the company Truthear. In fact, this is a collaboration with the YouTuber Crinacle, which I'm actually a huge fan of. And the pair that we're going to check out today is the Zero Red, and I think they've also been called Project Red. There's not really a whole lot of information out there on them yet. In fact, I don't even know the retail price, but their first collaboration, which was just the Zeros, those came in at $50. I'm going to assume that this is going to be around that $50 price tag. It may be a little bit more because there are some differences in these compared to the Zeros. We'll talk about some of that. We're also going to talk about what all comes inside the box, talk about the sound, and see if it's worth that sub $100 price tag. Now, first off, I do want to say that I'm excited to check these out, mainly because I am a huge fan of Crinacle. That is one of the YouTubers I'd like to watch pretty much any video he releases, and I'm also a fan of the way that he's tuned his IEMs in the past. He's had plenty of different collaborations. The original Zeros, which he collaborated with, was a huge success, and Project Red, which is what I'm going to call these, is basically like a version 2 of the original Zeros. Now, this pair is still using a 10mm and a 7.8mm dual dynamic driver setup, but the Reds now come with a bass adapter. It's basically this little 3.5mm plug that you just would plug these in at the end before you plug it into whatever device you're using, and it's going to boost the bass some. And I like this approach because it's giving you two different sound signatures, or it's at least elevating the bass a little bit without having to have an external amp or a DAC or anything like that. You can just plug this in and it's going to boost it, and it gives you that little bit of bump in the low end. But we'll talk about that once we get to the sound. Now, some other things they've included in the box. I actually like this little leather pouch that they've included. It opens up in a kind of a weird way, but they've also included 7 different sets of ear tips. You're getting 2 different style of silicone ear tips, and you are getting 1 set of foam ear tips. So there's plenty to choose from right out of the box. The different style of silicone ear tips does affect the sound quality, so make sure to try out both if you're going to check these out. And then it also comes with a silver plated cable that's using the 2-pin connection. Now, I actually like this cable. It's not thick. It's not one that kind of keeps its form. It's one that's pretty flexible. I found it to be really comfortable around my ears. Now, the IEMs themselves are 3D printed. They are made from a medical grade resin, so you don't have to worry about that irritation that you might get from some other IEMs. It is very lightweight. I will say that the nozzle on these, though, is pretty wide, which I actually think benefits the sound quality. I've tested some IEMs that have the really small nozzle, and it feels like it's kind of holding back compared to some like these that have that wider nozzle. But again, we'll talk about that once we get to the sound. Now, some of the differences in this pair is the original Zeros had an impedance level of 10 ohms, where the Project Reds come in with 17.5 ohms, so it takes a little bit more to drive these. You're going to be able to get plenty of volume if you just plug them straight into a phone or a laptop or whatever without having to use an amp. The frequency response, there's also a difference here because the original Zeros went from 20 hertz all the way up to 39,500 hertz, where the Project Red goes from 12 hertz all the way to 40,500 hertz. So the frequency response is definitely wider on the Project Red. Again, I definitely feel like you can tell a difference when it comes to the sound quality, which we'll just go ahead and jump into that. Now, I do want to say, if you really want to get the most out of these, just like I say with any other IEM or wired headphone, I do recommend an amp. I do want to go ahead and say again that I don't feel like it's necessary with this pair. I think you get plenty of power and plenty of volume just plugging straight into devices, but amps always help bring out a little more out of what you're using, and that's how you're going to be able to really enjoy it to its full potential. But the sound that these have, again, I'm going to go back to the fact that Crinacle understands that, you know, flat response is great, but having that boosted low end is just a bonus. The bass on these definitely has a presence. Now, this is without even using the bass adapter. The bass adapter just elevates it a little bit more. It gives it a little bit more of a boomy feel, but the bass does not come in and destroy the mids and the treble. So that's important in itself because there's plenty of pairs out there that can be bass heavy, but it's going to destroy everything else. And I don't know if that's because it's separated by using 2 different drivers, because the treble on these is also very bright. Now, some people are not going to like this. Some people don't like a harsh treble. I am actually a huge fan of having a harsh treble if it's going to be mixed with a very boomy bass. So the bass and the treble definitely stand out. That's also not taking away from how great the mids are on this pair. I felt like both male and female vocalists sounded great. I heard a lot of details in both, and also, guitars had a really nice presence to them. The mids are not pushed very forward. I think they just kind of sit pretty neutral where they need to, but luckily they're not drowned out with the bass and the treble. And I found it to be a pretty satisfying mix without even having to use that bass adapter. So, if you want that little bit of extra thump, and where I found that I like to use this is if you're going to be using these for gaming, which I feel like these really excel at. I feel like being able to hear dialogue and footsteps and the awareness on these, I felt like were great. It's a pair that feels like it's matched very well for gaming and movies, but I found that it sounded great across all genres. So if I'm going to break it down into the different genres, if you mainly listen to pop and hip hop, I would give these a 9. I feel like when it comes to IEMs, this is definitely one of those that focuses a little bit more on the low end, where a lot of IEMs kind of skip over that and focus a little bit more on details. So I feel like that fits very well with those genres. Now, if you're going to listen to rock, I was also a huge fan of these for that genre. I'd give them a 9 here as well. I feel like even if it's like metal where things are very fast and things are very chaotic, this pair had no issues with being able to keep up with that. It separated each hit of the drums. You can feel the bass. You can hear vocalists. Guitar riffs sound nice and clean. So it was a fun earbud to listen to with that genre. And then when it comes to easy listening, I would drop it down to an 8 here. Although it really does represent vocalists very well, that boomier bass doesn't usually tend to work well with these type of genres. And then when it comes to media, this is where I give these a 10. This was just such a fun pair to use for gaming, and it's kind of hard to explain without actually trying these out. But that boosted bass is allowing you to kind of feel a little bit more with explosions and things like that. But the brightness in the treble is allowing you to hear a lot of different subtle things. And I feel like the soundstage and the sound imaging is also done really well, especially for a pair that has bass that's this prominent. It makes me feel like I'm in a large room, and I had no issue with being able to tell where different sounds were coming from. So my overall rating on these, I'm going to give a 9. Now that in itself is just based off sound alone. If I'm going to say from a value standpoint, because I do feel like these are going to be under $100, this really will push that level of being close to a 10. I think you're getting a lot for your money. I definitely think these punch well above their weight, and they can compete with some much more expensive IEMs. I mean, some of my favorite pair are the Eco OH1s and the OH10s. I feel like this is on par with those, and they actually have better treble than the Ecos do. So I'm finding myself kind of picking these up a little bit more, and that's saying a lot. So guys, that wraps up my video on the brand new Truthear Zero Red or Project Red or version 2 or whatever the name of these are. Thank you so much for checking out this video. Thank you so much for checking out all the other videos. And as always, make sure to stay tuned for more.